The second most important role in the organization the next 3 to 5 years is going to be the RevOps, the CEO and the RevOps person.
What's up, everybody? This is Dan Quirk, host of Go-to-Market Excellence here, and co-hosting with me on this episode is my colleague, Heather Quitos. She's head of content at Scale Matters and the host of the Data Room podcast that just launched. It is streaming everywhere. So we have a very, very special guest today on the show, and he needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. Sangram Vajre is the Chief Evangelist and co-founder at Terminus, and he's the founder of also at Peak Community. He's the host of Flip My Funnel podcast, and he's now a 3-time author with the release of his new book, Move. Sangram, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Dan, Heather, excited to be back in here with you guys. I am super thrilled with what this book is bringing out and the conversations that are happening. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we're delighted to have you. And you ran a poll recently related to your book. You ran the poll on LinkedIn, and you asked people who owns go-to-market strategy. And 47% of the respondents said the chief marketing officer, 24% said the chief revenue officer, and in third place was the CEO at a lowly 23%. So set the people straight, Sangram. Who owns go-to-market and why?
And there lies the rub. There lies the problem. There lies all the sins of the world in the SaaS world, if you will. It's the CEO. It is the CEO. And I'm not saying this as a hyperbole, right? Like, this is when I had a conversation with Brian Halligan, who's the CEO of HubSpot, a publicly traded company with 100,000 customers. Talk to Nick Mehta, the CEO of Gainsight. Like, these are their answers. So a poll tells us what the sentiment is, what people think. But in reality, when you do the poll with just the CEOs, every one of those CEOs said, "You kidding me? I own it." And even I challenged them and said, seriously, like, come on, Nick, like, come on, Brian, like, you have like 20,000 employees. You got a bunch of things to do. Like, of course, a buck stops at you, but I really mean you own it. And like, there are only 3 things I own as a CEO. I own the vision for the company. I need to constantly iterate that and constantly make sure that we're on the same path, or on a path that excites people, that excites investors, excites the community. Makes sense. I own the culture of the company. If I can have great talent and great culture, it's not going to go anywhere. But the third thing, which is the unsexy thing that nobody talks about, that is literally the reasons they can't sleep and wake up having dreams, is their go-to-market. And when we say go-to-market, I think we need to explain that. What they mean really is that, are we going to open a new office in Europe? Are we acquire a new company? Should we have a new data strategy? Should we do an agency program so that we can quadruple? Because nobody in the organization has that level of view of all the problems that are happening in your organization than the CEO. So it was really a burning desire for them to really let people know that, hey, they own it, and it's not the sexiest part of their job, but they own it.
And obviously the poll is probably a little biased because so many marketers follow you. But
Yes.
What do you say to the marketers who are a little out of line there?
Well, in the book, I call them the galvanizers. The marketers and the CMOs, you need to be the galvanizers of this conversation in your company. Now, as a marketer, you probably have so much insight of what's going on and probably what's not working, and you get hit from all angles. Like, the product is not selling. Marketing, why don't we put a data sheet together? Customers are not happy. Why don't we create a customer story? Like, so marketing get hit from every angle every day. Like, poor souls. Like, I feel for marketers. But you literally can go and have this conversation with your executive team saying, team, what stage of the business are we in? Are we in a problem market fit? Are we in a product market fit? Are we in a platform market fit? Those are the 3 P's we talk about in the book. Because once you know what stage of the business you're in, now you can say, okay, based on this, based on the fact that we're here, here are the things that we should focus on. Like, RevOps is one of the great examples we talked about a little bit last time. Is if you are so early in your organization, this would make no sense for you to start in a RevOps group. You just are not ready for it. It's a waste of time. It sounds good. It will burn you more really, in not a good way. But then if you get to a product to platform, RevOps become your silver bullet. That's the team. That's the second biggest, best role in the entire organization as companies mature. I
Wow.
believe, and I've said this, I don't know if last time we recorded that, the second most important role in the organization the next 3 to 5 years is going to be the RevOps, the CEO and the RevOps person. So if people can understand the importance of that role and what it can do to the company and drive the business forward, it's phenomenal.
I think that's a good segue into a question I had just reading through the book. You said that RevOps is a new function that very few organizations have embraced. So why do you think, if you are at Platform Fit or some of these more established companies, why are companies missing this opportunity to embrace RevOps?
Every person, so this is a classic question, that we all have asked around. Hey, if I give you $1 more, what will you spend? Right? Every leader has got that question from every nonsensical leader, because it is the hardest thing to ask, and the other person is only going to look at their own little portfolio of things they own and say, well, if I'm in marketing and if you ask me the question, I might put more towards content or design, or I will look at that. If you ask that to a sales leader, they might say, I might hire an SDR or an AE. If you asked it to a product person, they may say engineering. So that question of $1 is a wrong question to a wrong audience. So Heather, to your point, the reason RevOps is so much more important and why companies have been challenged with addressing it is because they have been working in their silos, and RevOps sits above all of that, if not at least at the peer level. Typically, a RevOps will report directly into the CFO or a CEO. They have zero interest in making marketing look good or sales look good, or keeping people jobs or not jobs. They are so unbiased for their role to be effective. They have to come in and say, here's what's working, folks. Here's what's not working. Here's the opportunity that we all should be thinking about and talking about. And now they are the best one. The CEO should be asking the RevOps leader, hey, RevOps leader, if we were to put more budget, if we were to raise more money, where would you see us putting in? What would be the top 2 buckets? They will have a much more objective response to that. And then, of course, there will be debate later on to think through it. But the question to a siloed organization leads people to a path of just making their group better as opposed to the organization better at large.
Yeah, I love that, just because I know a lot of other RevOps leaders have talked about the importance of staying unbiased, or as some people call it, the Switzerland of the company, because you don't have your foot or your hand in any sort of department one way or another, right? You're using the data or the information at hand to elevate your team or elevate the company and their growth strategy. So
Shout out to Alex from Pendo for the Switzerland.
absolutely. We're going to steal his expression for the time being. I also want to touch on one thing you do say about the RevOps team, or just operations in general. You mentioned that it's important to approach operations from an not from an efficiency standpoint, but for effectiveness. So can you talk a little bit about the difference between efficiency and effectiveness in an operations standpoint?
Oh, so good. I love that question, Heather, because in the book, I really went deep on that one. It's like everyone wants to create an efficiency model. Well, then go work in a factory. Like, that's what efficiency models are like. How do you make more cars faster? Like that is a industrial way of thinking. A business way of thinking should be effectiveness. If I do this, will it create a 10x impact for a business? An example of that would be, let's just look at HubSpot. Like, we all know this as a company. Their 60% of the revenue still comes from agency partners. 60%. Now, when you look at that as a business, it's a effective way of running the business. Instead of hiring a ton more salespeople in their own organization, they created a program with agencies and made them the heroes and let them have all the cost associated with manpower and all that stuff, and enabled them. And that drove them to become a public company. So they created an effective model. If they were to create an effective model, if they were to create, just like, I want to create more efficiency, they will just hire more salespeople and try to get more of them quote out of it. Another example could be like Bombora, the intent data provider. Instead of they saying, you know what, we are going to have salespeople selling all this every day, they became a layer behind all the ABM companies for data, right? That's what they do. Is they're like, we don't need to create our own. We can white label this thing. So they created an efficient model to drive their distribution and expansion of their business. And before we know, there'll be $100 million company. So I want people to start looking at operations in a way to find a way to create an efficient business model, right? Sorry, an effective business model, but efficiency, when you look at one-to-one, how do I change my quota numbers? It's really hard. It's really hard to make those change. But you can make big decisions like that only when a RevOps person is looking at it and saying, guys, hiring 5 more salespeople is really not, it's going to take a year to get there and all that stuff. But if we create a partner program, now we're talking about some real scale.
Yeah, I think when you talk about effectiveness, it's almost like being a little more creative in a sense, right?
Yes.
Not just looking at the numbers and tweaking these little things here and there, but it's how can you take it to the next level and find a way that's more effective than previously thought. So that's a good point.
But they're also really related, because if you have a high CAC environment, go-to-market environment, that's super capital inefficient.
Yes.
And then you're wasting a bunch of money, so you can't actually deploy it towards these new, maybe more lofty strategies, or you can't really test and experiment in new things that could be big winners. So they are related too, but your point is that if you're just focused on how can we save $1, or like cut spending here, get a little bit more efficient here, if that's your only view, then you're going to be limited in growth. Is just to summarize, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Not only limited in growth, as Heather said, it's like this is where creativity really kicks in. I remember this conversation with Brian, just because that's just fresh and we've been talking about this, is where when I asked him, like, if you were to start HubSpot again, let's just use that as an example since we're on that train, what would you do differently? And he thought about it and he looked at it and said, well, look, if I were to start another company today, I would create a business model innovation. It's no longer about another product innovation. I want to create a business model innovation. So I think about RevOps, and I think about the way you think about go-to-market. We all need to think about a different way to go to market, as opposed to the traditional ways that only led us to have efficiency metrics that pulls things together. At some point, they are going to be required, and they are going to help you, and they are going to help you scale. But the 10x output, when companies leapfrog and move forward, that doesn't happen when you're just looking at incremental changes in your organization. It looks at the same time you're doing this big bets in your organization that say, you know what, let's just try agency, let's just try freemium model, let's just try product-led growth, let's just not just sales-led growth, because that has become the default for B2B industry as a whole.
How have you seen that play out at Terminus? What are some of the big bets that you've made?
Well, if you think about, right, in the early days, you all know about Flip My Funnel. Like Flip My Funnel was a go-to-market strategy. It was a way to create an industry conference as opposed to a Terminus company conference. The company conference, only the people we knew would come, and it will be our own like party, like big deal. But when we created an industry conference, we invited the competitors to come and speak. Even today, our competitors come and speak on the same stage as Flip My Funnel. We created the podcast about Flip My Funnel, about the problem to solve of changing the way marketing and sales is done. So it still doesn't have Terminus product or Terminus service or anything like that. It's about creating a wave around like, there got to be a better way to do this. This less than 1% of the leads turning to customers doesn't make sense. What could be a better way? Let's look at a different way. So we're not telling people what to do exactly. We're just getting people curious and inspired about like, let's all find a better way to do it. So in our case, our go-to-market process, if you will, was category creation. We wanted to create a category so that there's enough people, enough media, enough buzz about it as you're building a product underneath to support what people are talking about. Much different than a product-led growth company. Some companies like Calendly is a great example of a product-led growth. They created a great product that is, they would just create it and then people would embed it and now it has a viral effect. Very different way. Not one thing is not wrong or better than other. It is what market you're in and how the founders think about it and what opportunities in front of you.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, you guys are definitely maybe the first to do that model of the conference that wasn't company focused. It wasn't like a customer conference. It was like a category conference. I mean, I remember even our investors, they were like, you see what Sangram's doing? Oh, this is back in 2015. You go do what Sangram's doing. That's what people would say back
It
in
is
2015,
hard though, Dan.
2016.
I'll tell you, like I think it is I appreciate that comment, and I'll tell you it's even hard, it's harder still today to get people to think that way, because it almost feels like, wait a minute, why wouldn't we put our name on top of this thing, right? Why wouldn't we make it all about us? Like it, so it's a natural, there's nothing wrong with that feeling. But when we start thinking that the people around us are actually smart enough to know what's going on and give them credit for being smart humans, I think you start realizing that you don't even have, I don't even have to say Terminus, and people would associate me with Terminus because clearly that's the company I represent. So I think it takes a level of, I think a view of what your go-to-market. The other real problem and why we did that was I actually tried being totally vulnerable about this thing. I actually tried to build a Terminus event. Like that is what I wanted to do. Truly, that is what I wanted to do. But nobody would sponsor that event because nobody knew us. Nobody cared about us. So I went online, bought the domain for $8, flipped my funnel, and emailed and videoed the same people saying that, hey, look, 3 months ago, I reached out to you. We knew a Terminus event, but we flipped it. We're changing it. We're calling it the industry event called Flip My Funnel. It's all about challenging the status quo of marketing sales. We'd love to see if you want to sponsor. You get to be on a keynote stage. You get to invite people you want. We'll be a booth just like everybody else. It is going to be an industry conference. Every one of them said yes.
Wow.
Every one of them. So we ended up doing 4 events in 1 year. And in the first year, all paid off, $0 out of our pocket. So it wasn't that we were brilliant and we did it. We actually had to do it because we couldn't. Nobody would do Terminus events. So in a bad way, it might look brilliant, but that's not where we started. We were literally had no other way to get in the market.
That's what they call learning from previous missteps or mistakes, right? So
Yes.
way to pick that up.
Let's get back to the book for a second. So you perfectly describe what things are like at companies that don't have a centralized go-to-market process. I mean, and I'll just summarize it using what you said. You said doing business feels messy when you don't have a centralized go-to-market process. But when you do have a high-functioning and autonomous RevOps team, describe some of the positive side effects that the company will feel in sales, SDR, marketing, like what will those leaders of those functions feel when RevOps is functioning well, when it's autonomous, unbiased and everything like that? Maybe you have some experience to speak from a Terminus. Go ahead.
Yeah, totally. Like Mallory Lee, like who runs our RevOps. I mean, and she would be fun one to have on your podcast if you ever want to pull her in, because she literally evolved my understanding of all of it. And we're seeing it. I've been seeing it for the last 1.5 years in our company. Every Tuesday, she does this, and it's beautiful to watch. Where what happens is, first of all, nobody's having this conversation that I call "Who moved my cheese?" Right? Like everybody got their cheese. Everybody be happy. Like nobody's trying to move your cheese. This is a clear view of where the business is. It is not about a particular function. So we don't have marketing and sales and we don't have people in buckets. This is a business go-to-market scorecard. So it repositions that we're all business leaders specializing in the functions that you are. So if you're a CRO, you're a business leader who are specialized in revenue. If you're a CMO, you're a business leader specialized in marketing. So you come in here as an advisor. You come in this meeting as a great participant. You come in as a meeting as someone who could actually say, you know what, I can help there. Let me raise my hand or ask for help because I don't know how to do this thing. So it really allows everybody to literally walk in their lane of genius as opposed to defending themselves and saying, here's not working, right? And if you have the right RevOps leader leading it, there won't be any surprises to anybody. They will already have gone through that information with you. They will already have told you like, hey, look, you know what, there are a couple of things going to come up. You better have answers for these things because that's gonna trip over. And I know what the CEO is going to be wanting from you and asking for you. So now if you have a great relationship there, now you're building again a very thoughtful conversation. And the big output that I have seen at Terminus coming out of it is that we always walk out of that meeting knowing what we need to work on and what's not working. Honestly, that sounds pretty rudimentary, but in many times in the last 7 years of building Terminus, I've walked in and out of some similar meetings without really knowing, like just more confused. Say, all right, I thought this worked. Now I'm more confused what's working, what's not. But in the last year and a half, at a minimum, everybody's on the same page. Guys, that multi-product sales strategy is just not working. Everybody can be okay with that, know that. So we need to pivot it. We need to try something else. Like that level of conversation is so gratifying and so uplifting because it's hard to build a business. It's hard to pull things together. So having somebody own that part and give a sense of the business and let you operate in your lane of genius is one of the biggest areas for RevOps to bring to light.
Wow, that's huge. Because so many of those meetings, everyone comes in with their walls up, ready to defend what they're doing and fight for more budget or, defend from criticism. But when you can have that unbiased view, like you're explaining with RevOps, everyone's kind of rooting for each other. You're in it together and you're not, there's less blame shifting, it sounds like.
Yeah, it does. It is. And again, you have to have the right RevOps. Like let's even, if you look at the move framework in the book, it is not just about RevOps. The move really is also about figuring out your market. So for example, in a problem market fit, if you're in the early stage of a business and you could be a $20 million company still in a problem market fit, by the way, which means that you may not know what's happening. At that time, you might be looking at total addressable market, any and everybody that has a pulse in that market. But then as you move to product market fit, you start looking at what we call TRM, total relevant market. How do I go into this specific market and do well? And then as you move even further in a platform market fit, which means you have now 1,000+ customers, and you want those customers want more products and services from you. There are competitors in the marketplace, so you need to have a bigger market share and wallet share. There, at that point, you actually look at customer cohorts, which means forget the net new accounts that you're coming in. You're looking at your 1,000 customers and actually having conversation at the RevOps level, saying, you know what? We would be better off without those 200 customers. We would be more profitable, would be better at our CAC, all the LTV, all those data numbers. We would be actually be able to hire more strategic people to work on these accounts. And these accounts, the right cohort, will actually help us get bigger deals and will stay with us longer. So now, think about this. As an organization, all of a sudden, never before I have thought I would have this thing is like, how do I get rid of 100 customers? Like that is not an easy thought to even cross somebody's mind in a business setting. But that's what RevOps allows you to start thinking about, because they can break it in the cohorts that actually matter to the business, that will have greater valuation and output for your business.
Wow. So like, let's get rid of the top 100 customers who are super high touch. They require the most support. And they don't pay the most.
Yeah.
For example.
And it will eventually happen for every business, because you start with a problem market fit. You start with any and everybody just figuring out what works, what not. So over a period of time, all of us are collecting this debt and baggage in our business, because nobody's fault. It's just how business has to move on to figure out what works. But when you figure out what works, then you need to make a decision. How are you going to go about it? What are you going to do with the other people? Are you going to call it a loss? Are you going to call it bad? Are you going to fire customers? Like, what are you going to do? How is that going to, the relationship? Maybe they're the right people, but the wrong company. So many important things and decisions you need to make. And it's not an overnight thing. This is where go-to-market shines.
I think you made a good point that speaking in that whole thread, like go-to-market is an iterative process, right? It's not just a kind of set it and forget it. You do it once and you're good for the rest of your 20 years of your company existing. It's how do you constantly look at this engine and say, okay, can we make it better every step along the way based on if I'm in that problem, product, platform fit. So that totally makes sense. I think one thing you note about kind of going back to what you said about like using RevOps to kind of look at these things. They're obviously using data, and I think you had said something about data being standardized, accurate, and holistic. And RevOps can make that data effective. And we've talked about effectiveness. And then on top of that, the RevOps team can be responsible for streamlining the tech stack to create that data and make sure it's effective. So we here are huge proponents of using data to not just capture data and using the tech stack just to capture data, but to actually extract actionable insights from it, right? So can you talk a little bit about how important capturing go-to-market data and actually using that go-to-market data is for a company to move through these three P's of stages?
Oh, totally, Heather. I think in the book we go through and I was very careful to not put the names of the companies, but put the categories of the company, right? Like for example, you don't need like I ran marketing at Pardot, right? I'm marketing automation stuff, but the reality is you may actually not need marketing automation at all. You really start thinking about it when you really go into ABM and go after one-to-one personalized conversations with top 50 accounts. If you're selling with $100,000 plus bigger deal size with 6 month sales cycle, you probably don't need to spam people with a bunch of emails. You could use MailChimp or something else to send your newsletter, send your email things, but the value is going to be that in one-on-one personalization. So you could probably get away with some of the high-priced process tech stack as opposed to doing it. So this allows, if you really think about go-to-market as a strategic driver to move your business forward, you can actually reimagine. You can actually go dreaming and think about like, what do I start with a clean slate? What do I really need to drive my business forward? Which is why I think at some point, my good friend Scott Brinker with all the MarTech landscape and all that stuff, it's at some point chief architecture, like he had that role, like the chief architect, I don't know what else they've got, chief marketing technologist or something like that, was starting to become a key role. But that wasn't with the business. It was from somebody needs to take care of all the tech that happens. Like that was still more of a arbitrator of that, who owns what product and how the data goes in. This is a business conversation. RevOps, because RevOps is going to have all the operations rolling into it, they can also say, well, where's the data flowing so I can get the best data so I can create best analysis for the executive team to make decisions. So now it makes sense to have this in the home of RevOps, the analysis, the tech, and how the data flows. Because if they don't have the right data, they can't do any of the stuff that we're talking about. So I think it's in the book, we go into like, well, you may think you need 50 tools or 50 different technologies. You actually might need a lot less than that. And as long as they're flowing and connected, you're better off. The more you add without understanding how it drives business, the harder it's going to be for your organization to make decisions.
1000%. I think a lot of RevOps leaders are starting to jump into these positions where they've bought a bunch of tech stack tools and not sure what type of questions they're trying to answer with all of that tech stack, right? Like, does this make sense? Should we perform a gap analysis to make sure that we're using marketing automation in a way that actually helps our teams instead of just, like you said, spamming people just because we have the tool to do it? So having a RevOps team that understands the strategic component of using a tech stack is totally important. I agree.
I don't know if you experienced this as you've grown in your career, but like earlier on, to buy technology and marketing or sales, you kind of had to go through your IT team at most tech companies. Yeah. And then it kind of got decentralized. And then, as the head of marketing, you could go out and like buy HubSpot or buy whatever, Terminus, without going through IT. But then you create these Frankenstein tech stacks evolved, right? And now it seems like we're coming back to like clear thinking again, that no, it's not good to just have like IT owning it, because they are, not the, like a centralized IT team is not the best way to like buy your go-to-market tech stack, but it's not the best way if like frontline marketers or like heads of marketing and sales are running the tech stack either and making those decisions. It's kind of like we're getting to a nice balance now where RevOps is owning it and they're putting tools in place strategically, at least at the forward-thinking companies. I think we're coming back around to like clearly thinking about this whole thing again. And I'm curious if you've noticed that as you've gone along.
Yeah, I think the part of all of this, I'll underline and underscore that over and over again, which is that it's a business function.
Yeah.
When it was with IT, it wasn't a business function. It was somebody needs to own this so that we know what's going on. And it was more of a purchase order, like, hey, all procurement stuff needs to
Yeah.
go to IT, right? Like that was the whole thing. And marketing is like, what the heck are we talking about here? Right? We just send email to our customers, like, so it was a contentious relationship that was built in to from a cost center perspective as opposed to revenue center. And if we are truly talking about go to market is a revenue center. The reason go to market exists is because go to market is to help your business move in the market faster, in a more cohesive way, in a way that will be more effective. So if that means this team has not, shouldn't be a bottleneck, it should be the driver of it. I see a day where RevOps says, hey, marketing team, you need this tool. You need to go get something to help you do this because we're not getting the results we want from it. And actually, RevOps will ask CMOs to say, think about more stuff that could add to it, not the other way around where they're asking for permission from RevOps. So as long as go-to-market, as people look at it as a business function, and we don't make it a cost center, procurement centric organization, I think there will be a ton of value for it. At the same time, I think marketing still needs to be able to play and see what works, what doesn't work, and test certain things and bring it back. Like all that stuff is still continue to happen. But man, can you imagine if a business can drive based on truly recognizing here's the revenue, here's where we need to go, we need to get more here, so let's just get more tech or more support. I think RevOps is in such a good. So I hope good people get into these roles, not the people who want more process, more structure, more rules. Like that, if that's their mindset, that's not a great person to be in RevOps. A person who's like, I want to be a CEO 3 years from now or 5 years from now. I want to essentially understand the business of whatever we are in. I want to work with the CFO to drive our business forward. If that's the mindset, that's the right RevOps leader.
I couldn't agree more. All right. So question for you on, you've written a few books now. How do you measure the success of a book? And specifically, like obviously there's, personal branding that is associated with that, but like, you don't just do it for, to grow your personal brand. You do it to, to create a movement. You did this with the Flip My Funnel. Or it was called, ABM is B2B is ABM, right? ABM is B2B.
ABM is B2B.
Yeah. And so how do you measure the success of the book for the enterprise?
Yeah. So for example, ABM is B2B is literally a staple book now. It's getting into universities and companies so students are learning in universities now on the basic concept of ABM. So our goal, or at least my personal goal, was if more companies or more people adopt this idea of not going spammy and leads and actually focus on accounts, we'll just have a better business as an entire world, just broadly speaking, marketing and sales world. So from that perspective, globally, that's how we're thinking. But from a company perspective, man, every time our sales team, that is the best thing they could send to a customer or future customer. Here's a book for you and your entire team to read. It's well written. You have stories of companies that have gone from status quo to 1.0 to 2.0. It is a framework called Team that you can implement, and here's all stuff. So it gives them like, oh, they have put some, they're not just trying to sell me a product. They're actually really trying to help my team be better. So, and then we'll have trained people in our company, in our services team, that do team workshops all day long. So now with the book, with the maturity curve in that book, they're able to go in and do workshops for companies to move them, because we all know it takes time, it takes effort. It's not an overnight switch. So that's how the book has really helped us continue to be part of the education process for our customers and our future customers. I think about go-to-market the same thing. I surely think it's like 10 times bigger idea than ABM, because ABM only focused on marketing and sales. This is marketing, sales, customer success, but at the executive level, and transformation start from there, right? Like this book is for people who want to make decisions and change, not just be inspired. I don't want anybody, like, inspired is fine. I don't want anybody to be inspired and like, oh, what a great idea. I'll puke all over. I want people to do something. Like, go do something. Like, go have this conversation. What stage of the business I'm in? Go have this conversation. What should be our next move? Go have this detail. Like, hey, do we really do? How do we build a RevOps team? Like, that's what I want to have people. So I want change to happen. And I'm personally signing up to say, in the next year, I want to see 100 companies transform their business and figure out what the next move is with the book. So that's how, some of the way I'm looking at success for it.
That's awesome. So the 100 companies, tell us more about that. What do you mean by 100 companies transforming the way they do that, and how are you going to see that through?
Yeah, so in next couple of weeks, we'll launch on the movebook.com, we'll launch assessment. It's already built. People are working on it right now. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll have an assessment where companies can actually go through an assessment of where that stage of the business is. Once they know it and they see it, the book will it will show them like, all right, here are the next steps you could move. And then we can potentially start doing, this is still in the makings, maybe it's a virtual mastermind, or we could do events that around this that take cohorts of companies, get 100 companies to sign up to say, for the next year, let's be in this together. Let's learn from each other. Not everyone has the same answers, because everybody's the go-to-market process is different. As we talked about, it could be a product-led growth or a category-led growth or a sales-led growth. So it's not cookie cutter for them. But if we can build a cohort of companies, of 100 companies, to say, we want to be on this journey and grow and see how we can cross the chasm from problem to product or product to platform, that I think is what we're thinking of launching next year.
That's super exciting. So where can people buy Move?
All right. Well, it's all the places where you should go to Amazon. You should be able to see all the books and stuff. And 100% of the proceeds, by the way, for this book for this year goes to New Story charity, which is ending homelessness forever. It's like one of the best charities. People should just check that charity out. Like, if you don't buy my book, go to New Story charity, look at them. Like, that's like phenomenal charity.
I watched some of the videos about the 3D printed homes. That's unbelievable. So why is New Story something that's near and dear to your heart?
Well, I met Brett, who's the CEO of the company. He's in Atlanta as well. And we have just exchanged so many conversations, and I've just seen their heart and work. I love their business model. Talk about business model innovation. It's a charity, but it's not where you don't know where the money is going. 100% of the money that people give them goes directly to the homeless people. Like, it doesn't go, or building homes, sorry. It doesn't go to all the people who work in the company. For the people in the company, they have a separate bank account where people like me who are founders are able to fund them. Like, you need to hire the best people to work on these projects. So they have separated out a business administration cost and actual fundraising to help the homeless getting homes and building homes. And they're doing it in a 3D printing, like, innovative way. So I feel great about when there is innovation in business. Like, nonprofit is waiting to be disrupted, right?
Sure.
So I think they're doing it so well, and their hearts are at the right place. They're building communities, which is very much closer to me. They're not building one house at a time. They're building 100 3D printed houses as a community, because they have to do it together in bunch. So I just love that as an idea. We need to inspire innovation out there. So what better? This is about innovating your business, go to market. I feel like innovating your house and homelessness, that whole thing. They're doing it the same way.
Absolutely. Wow. That's super
Awesome.
cool. So buy a book, build a house, and transform your go-to-market engine.
There you go. That is what I should write down in there. Like, those are the 3 things. That should be the email that goes out.
Yeah.
I love this conversation. This has been really enlightening, just across the board, about just hearing about this framework. It almost sounds intuitive, but at the same time, like you said, it's really hard to think about your go-to-market process in a way that can actually move, pun intended, move your business forward. So thank you, Sangram, for the great conversation today. And I think as we mentioned, go check out the book, Move. I think it's themovebook.com or
movebook.com or Amazon. You can get it from anywhere. Yep.
Awesome. And if you can't catch Sangram anywhere else, he'll be on all the channels promoting this great framework and all the other frameworks that you've created along the way. So thank you, Sangram, for your time today.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Dan, for letting me jump in and share my passion on this.
Thanks for coming on the show, Sangram. Talk to you soon.
All right, thanks.